Good afternoon. My name is Charles Griffith. I am Special Projects Director for the Guyana Media Proprietors Association, Inc. We are Channel 2, Channel 6, Channel 8, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 13, Channel 16, 102, DTV in New Amsterdam, 93, Kaieteur News, and Stabroek News. We are a total of 12, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about democracy, improvement, and human rights under the European Instruments for Democracy and Human Rights. And we want to consider media governance to include public awareness, engagement, consultation, and professional development, race relations, and other objectives within the fundamentals to community and national interests, Know Your Rights Plus. This project has been sponsored by Guyana Media Proprietors Association, and we got some help, tangible help, from the partnership of the European Union. Before I continue, I must define what is the media as practiced in democracies that adhere to the rule of law. The media is a legitimate resource that demands accountability and transparency from all within a society. The media also protects human rights, initiates debates and dialogue, and most of all, a gatekeeper to educate, inform, and entertain. The reason why I'm attempting to define the media is because I'm afraid that many Guyanese do not know what the role of the media is. And in this circumstance, we want to make it very, very, very clear that is what the media is. As regards to Guyana Media Proprietors Association, relative to how we define the media, we will champion the cause for media freedom and media responsibility. We will promote fair, open, and competitive business environment for our membership. We will serve the interests of the Guyanese public. That is, you out there. We want to partner with you so that when you have problems, you can come to us and we can assist you to generate solutions. We will build capacity for media progress and development, collaborate with supporting like-minded organizations, and we will undertake rudimentary association functions. But then we have this relationship with the European Union relative to European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights. And the relationship, the contractual relationship we have is that our association, GMPA, in collaboration with the European Union, and these are our objectives, we will advocate for legislation and regulation for self-regulation. In other words, we want to be the institution that represents the media industry, and therefore we will lobby those institutions that are responsible for promulgating laws, and that's the government. We will conduct public consultation and engagement. We will be involved in election preparedness, fair and balanced coverage, public awareness campaign, professional development, and we will be involved in production like what we are doing right here and broadcast materials. But let us be very, very clear with respect to media governance. Media governance structure started about 3 years ago when the Canadian government brought down Mr. Ian Alexander, and he spoke about media governance, which is the relationship between the media, the people, and the government within the Guyanese space. And I want to make this also pellucid. Media governance to include public awareness. I have it here in a tick, public awareness. In other words, what I'm attempting to do is to show you our contractual arrangement within this European Union instrument for democracy. Engagement. We have public consultation and engagement. And it's right here. Professional development. And it's right here. Race relations. You see, in Guyana, Guyana media proprietors believe that one of the deterrent to development, serious development to Guyana, is this problem of race relations that many people do not talk about. We have an ERC that addressed some aspects of it, but what Guyana media proprietors intend to do is to educate the Guyanese population about race relations and what solutions we can apply so in time, in a short period, we can attempt to reduce the magnitude of that divisiveness that exists in Guyana as a direct function of race relations. So the media, in our governance structure, we will consider race relations as a contribution to improve democratic processes in Guyana. We believe that you cannot improve democratic processes until the Guyanese population vote not based upon race, but upon circumstances, facts, and needs as prepared by the various political platforms. So in that context, the Guyana Media Proprietors Association attempt to look at the Guyanese space. Before you can initiate any type of intervention, we believe that the Guyanese space must be defined. And within that space, you will see those barriers that are preventing us from developing at the rate or at the magnitude we are supposed to develop. So let's take a look at this diagram. Within this rectangle, what we are defining in these corners is the Guyana space. We are multi-component or multiracial. We have East Indians, Africans, Chinese, mixed race, Amerindians, Portuguese, and local whites. We are non-ideal. That non-idealism refers to our Constitution, especially what Article 182, whereby we have a president who cannot be taken to court whilst in office or out of office. That is an anomaly. And there are other constitutional tenets which are anomalies. We are a refractive society. What do I mean by that? It means that we are so adversarial that as soon one politician says something, another politician and another group, they say something different. And that is where this reactivity comes in. Then we are polarized. The two major races in Guyana, those of East Indian origin and those of African origin or African culture, they're at their throats for diverse reasons. And then finally, the sixth component to define the Guyana space, we are sitting on an astonishingly multiplicity of natural resources. So these are the basic factors Guyana media proprietors are looking at in which, in order to develop, in order to generate solution relative to the racial problems, relative to development, relative to any circumstance to improve our livelihood, our status in Guyana, we must consider these 6 factors. We must factor in those. Then we ask ourselves, who are the decision makers in Guyana? Who are the stakeholders? You have the government, you have University of Guyana, You have the Trade Union Congress that represent workers' rights. And Dr. Clive Thomas liked to talk about the underground. Then you have the business organizations. And then we have our friends, the foreign missions, the media industry, which we're attempting to set up, and the people and civic organizations. If you notice here, I placed a rectangle around media and the people. And that is where we're going to function relative to the government. So this is the media governance. This is the media governance model here. But this whole, or this entire diagram, when we talk about those necessary structures that are impediments to our development, everything inside here falls within our Constitution. And because of that, this is our democracy. It is a social contract among all these stakeholders within the confinement of our Constitution. And this is how the Guyana democracy is defined. It is the relationship among all stakeholders within the Guyana space, given the anomalies. And that's the way our Constitution, our democracy is defined. You may recall that I spoke about media governance relative to race relations. But apart from that, we must ask ourselves in Guyana a specific question. Look at our environment and ask yourself, are we satisfied with what we have, given our multiplicity of natural resources? We must have a vision of where we want to go. And that vision on this chart is what I call destination. And that destination downstream, we want to be able to improve our standard of living. And how do we do that? We can improve our standard of living in this country if we follow the law, natural justice, which is broken down in fairness and civility. Civility is what builds a just society. And within civility, there are certain structures that you must follow. You must follow the rule of law, follow authority. There must be a balance. Culture on one hand, reason, spirit, and purpose, perspective, and it must be balanced. It must be balanced by safeguards and provisions. And therefore, there would be a climate, and that climate is for development. That climate will follow the rule of law. That climate will have objective policies, but there will be some exceptions. But with respect to fairness, there are some specifications governing fairness, especially when you talk about people in certain positions and you want to evaluate their functions, how they are performing. You will look at their character, you will look at their confidence, you will look at their diligence, reputation, and their standing. And by that, we will function within the tenets of natural justice. Remember, we want to get to a place whereby we can all enjoy a decent standard of living, increase our earning power. How do we do that also? We must establish that we want quality benefits, quality convenience, quality good, quality development, quality infrastructure, quality order, quality services, quality necessities. And how should we do that also? We want to build humble, visionary citizens, because I will show you that the power in this country lies collectively in the citizens. And if they make the right decisions based upon these adaptations, all we are attempting to do is to provide you with the knowledge for you to make constructive decisions. And we call them adaptations. The other thing we may want to do, we may demand action. We may demand compassion, courage, competence, fairness, decency, so that you can be fulfilled, and then function in a professional manner within what we call the patriotic framework as a professional for satisfaction, but that will require tremendous sacrifice in terms of the courage and competence and commitment that will be required to take us to this destination. We can get there, but all we need is a specific set of knowledge, specific set of tools to assist us to adapt to not only the circumstances in Guyana, but also to globalization. What else must we do? We must have this pride in us. And when I was telling Sharma Solomon in Linden about this model, he spoke about spirit. He said, we Guyanese have the spirit, but we do not have the will. I told him that I beg to disagree in that the spirit and the will are linked together. But what is necessary, it is the vision to drive that spirit and will with a commitment that you have a direct vision of where you want to go and how you're going to arrive there. So this is what I consider where we want to go. What are the hills and valleys? What are the barriers? What are the resistances along this path, which is not an easy path? My friends, fellow Guyanese, the path is not easy. But if we adopt these tools to build capacity, we can all get there in a very short period. And what must we do? You know, this whole construct of rights, knowing your rights. There are some structures within our Constitution should have been taught in high school so that all of us, after we graduate from high school, drop out from high school, we would know basically what some of our rights are. And those rights were not taught in school. When you know your rights, it's like sustained energy. It's like sustained energy. It provides you the tools to anticipate problems and therefore attempt to engage those problems or would-be problems before they arrive. In addition to that, knowing your rights is like a self-expanding capital. It's like money in the bank. You put it there, it gains interest. Because once it resides with you, you know your rights. Anytime anyone or any system or any construct or any model attempt to enforce on those rights, you will know about it, and chances are you will do something about it. You will debate it. 2, 3. We must be obedient to the laws of Guyana. Love your fellow citizens and dedicate your energies towards prosperity of Guyana. So what I have done so far, so that you can follow what I'm saying, this whole or entire complex of media governance, which we have defined as the relationship between the media industry, the people, and the government. Then we defined, prior to that, what the role of the media is in the society, what our role is, and our relationship with the European Union that had joined us, that supported us with respect to their instrument for democracy and human rights. What I'm about to tell you now is that the entire idea of knowing your rights, let's go backwards. We have a society, Guyana, that was developed way back on the backs of slavery, on the backs of indentured laborers. But in those constructs, especially in slavery, there was fear, division, and disenchantment, as well as detachment. Even in indentured laborers, what they did, they drew fear, or the masters drew fear in both of the major cultural groups, Indian and African. There was clear division and there was clear detachment. When that happened, that continued to some extent, whereby now in the society there's gross instability, there's violation of rights, and most of all, you're detached to a large extent from tangible wealth of Guyana. I am not blaming anyone. That is my observation. Where do we go from here? As part of Know Your Rights, there are certain constitutional tenets which, as I said before, should be taught in high school. Let's look at the preamble of the Constitution of Guyana. There are 10 paragraphs in there. And those paragraphs are so powerful because all the acts of the Constitution, this is the foundation of all the acts that came out from the Constitution. And in actually the first paragraph, the purpose of the Constitution, it must be maintained as aspirations and conditions to develop culture, economics, education, and improve the general standard of living of all the citizens. But the forebears, the folks that wrote the Constitution, they anticipate conflict, they anticipate expansion, and there were loopholes. But they said, the heirs, we that come afterwards, we must always cooperate and reconciliate, always find some way to reconciliate and cooperate, because those forebears fought for independence, fought for our sovereignty, fought for our dignity, our freedom, and they fought for decent wages long ago for us. And therefore, we the heirs should always remember that and use that as a basis, as a tool through which we must cooperate and reconciliate instead of fighting each other. The governance structure. Those forebears said that our governance structure should be of such that the participation should be broad-based, so that the decision-making process would involve everybody. Everybody will have a stake in the decision-making process relative to our development, community development, justice, law, the development of rights, and that is the entire value system of our democracy. We must always look at our racial diversity, celebrate it, and use it to our advantage where everybody can feel that they are a part of the developmental process. Racial discrimination, that should be eradicated completely, at all cost. These are tenets, these are little pieces of information, knowledge-based information, to build capacity so that we can make the type of decisions to improve our standard of living where we want to go. Our indigenous brothers and sisters, we must protect their rights and bring them into the decision-making process. And that brings me to our environment, which we are supposed to protect. My question to all Guyanese, why is it in this country where we have 83,000 square miles of land, and if you divide that by 2, you have 41,000 plus square miles of land. And if you say 41,000 is mountain, swamps, forests, rivers, therefore it seemed to me that we should have at a minimum 40,000 arable land. And we only have 800,000 Guyanese. How is it with 40,000 square miles of land, we Guyanese cannot get 1 acre or half an acre land free? And if you do the mathematics, it's less than 700 square miles of land. And still, you'll have over 30,000, 32,000 square miles land remaining. Why is it in this environment we cannot, as Guyanese, get at least half acre lands free, and still there will be 30,000 square miles of land over through which we can engage in the developmental process? That's just a school of thought. The other part of the preamble spoke about the configuration, the way the government structure is configured. You have parliament, the executive, and the judiciary. But this whole idea of constitutional tenets, we are an evolving democracy, and therefore, what the preamble is saying, given the circumstances that exist, we must always go back and ask ourselves, what will the founding fathers do today to perfect our governance configuration? So we must always strive to protect, to perfect our constitutional arrangements, or governance structure arrangements, and globalization. We live in a world that we call it now the seamless society. And because of the advent of information technology and on the whole the development of technology relative to communication, education, finance, and industry, infrastructure, any activity we're involved, the benefits of that activity should always go to all Guyanese so all of us can benefit. The decision-making process should be all of us involved in it, and so all of us can benefit from globalization expansion. And then finally, our young people. I do believe that every generation has its own leaders. It's a fact. And therefore, our young people with their aspirations, we should guide them and provide their tools for them to develop, to take over from us. And therefore, we should protect their rights and teach them, give them those tools that I'm identifying here so that they can cope. They can cope with globalization. They can cope with all of those factors that in the future they will have the tools, the basic tools, through which they can use as foundation to analyze whatever and make decisions for the benefit of all Guyanese. This is a preamble should be taught in high school. And that brings me now to some constitutional tenets. Article 13. It's a protective convergence, whereby the people, the government, and their representatives should manage the decision-making process insofar as those processes affect their livelihood. The way I'm interpreting this is like this. Since the Constitution and our governance structure is evolving, I am saying that Article 13 gives the people the right so that when you elected to go to Parliament, you're placed there to formulate the principles, formulate the laws, formulate the plan, but come back to us. Come back to us with that plan so that we can mull on it, we can discuss it, adjudicate it, debate it, and advise you what we want. In other words, that aspect of Article 13, we elect you to formulate the plans, but you come back to us, so there's a negotiation process. And I'm saying that the other aspect of Article 13 should be implemented, whereby the people are more involved in the decision-making process as a negotiation process, backwards and forward. Article 149, that gives the people and the state a confidence also to manage the decision-making process. Article 38A, B, whereby the government shall progressively remove all impediments from any self-sustaining activity by a citizen. And I'm interpreting that to mean that if you want to open a cake shop, and you only get $500 or $5,000, and a cake shop will cost you $8,000 to open, to stock them. I am saying that $3,000 that you need to stock the entire cake shop, the government should have a sum of money there that you, the citizen, can go there, borrow that $3,000 and take 30 years to pay back. In other words, they would have progressively removing the impediments for your self-sustaining activity. You're not asking it for free, but you're asking or requesting, based upon the Constitution, that you give me that $3,000 for whatever interest rate, but give me a long time to pay back, whereby my principal and interest would not affect me in the expansion of my business. My understanding that when you have tax break, and when you put in certain infrastructure I'm a professional engineer, and you put in infrastructure, that is practiced in Article 38B. But the ordinary man, the man in the street, them boy will sit on a grass corner and rap, play domino. Everybody should know this, that there is an article whereby progressive removement of impediments in any self-sustaining activity, you should demand it also. Article 40. Strange enough, we should not prejudice the thinking, individual autonomy of our citizens. And yet still, that is done in certain quarters. They tell you don't listen to anybody else. That in itself is violating Article 40, in that they are prejudicing your mind instead of giving you the facts so that you will cogently reason and make the decisions. Article 60.2. That gives Parliament, that sets out the establishment of Parliament based upon proportional representation. And that is what we have in Guyana at this point. Article 7. We have the regional system whereby substantial amount of money should be allocated to the regions so that development can take place. I am just highlighting some of the aspects of the Constitution so that we understand that these are tenets that we should have learned in high school. Article 103 and 106, that's where the president has the right to establish a cabinet. And Article 216, which has been receiving a lot of attention, whereby all monies All government revenues should be placed in the consolidated funds. These tenets should have been taught in high school, and we Guyanese would have been in a better position to make decisions that affect our livelihood as an adaptation process. An adaptation process. Information, your rights, so that it is self-expansion capital, that you can use it anytime if anybody tried to violate it. Then there are the labor laws. Normally, a colleague by mine by the name of Lincoln Lewis would explain these labor laws 21, the role of labor, the right and duty for work, termination of employment and services, occupation health safety, national insurance and social security. Again, these tenets should have been taught in high schools relative to labor, so when you come out from high school, you go for a job, your prospective employer, he knows that you know your right, and you know your right, so you can better negotiate working conditions for yourself. Fellow Guyanese, what I have done is to explain these constitutional tenets as part of Know Your Rights. So let's take a look at this diagram. This is where we want to go. If we think carefully about our pledge, if we think carefully about these constitutional tenets, and this plus I'm talking about is what I call rational bridge, spirituality, adversariality, democratic centralism, and common anchoring traits. Those are the additional features that are necessary for you to build capacity. And you're building capacity so that we will eradicate this scourge, this impediment within our race relations. We do not born a racist, but it is our environment that impinges upon our mind and set those features that cause us to want to be divisive, to want to fight each other, when we have a country full of a multiplicity of natural resources, whereby if we follow the rule of law, we can arrive at a destination where all of us can enjoy the benefits of our natural resources. And this takes me now to race relations. The African culture and the East Indian cultures exist in Guyana. Irrespective of the circumstances in which we arrive here, we are here now. I'm not ruling out the historical perspective. We are here now. And what do we have? We have an environment in which we have to adapt. We're not asking for mutation, we're asking for adaptation. You have to adapt to the climate. And that adaptation requires you to have some tools, and let's look at race relations. Let's look at it. Let's be practical about it. Let's not talk about it behind each other's backs, in our homes, behind walls, in the rum shop. As soon as the other race pass, we shut up. Let's face it. And this is where I have developed a set of tools that can provide a solution in very short order to our racial problems. And this is where I begin. Remember, I defined the Guyana space as non-ideal, adversarial, multi-component, polarized, reactive, but sitting on an astonishingly multiplicity of natural resources. I've been hearing that for a long time since I ever grew up. And I will still hear about them. What are we going to do about them? We got to find a way. We got to find a way, as our founding fathers said, we got to find a way to cooperate and reconciliate. We got to find that way. We have to look at each other straight in the eye and find some way whereby we can come together to develop this country, whereby all of us can arrive at this destination to improve our standard of living. So, let's take a look at the East Indian culture and African culture. You know, are we born and grow up here? Are we born and grow up here? How can we, as a people, there are a lot of common things among us. And so this is the East Indian culture, that's the African culture. These are the common things among us. And what are those common traits? Adjudication, aspiration, benevolence, compassion. We like to debate. We have skill. We want freedom. And we have to trust each other. And we could go through in detail what are the common things among us. Then we must add to these common features what I have just described here as civics, the preamble of our Constitution, some of our constitutional tenets, not all, but the main ones, that will provide protection and confidence among us, and understand the labor laws. So we're going to attach that here. So what we are attempting to do is to eat away at these differences among us. Then, spirituality. What I have done is to take a look at Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism. And this model, irrespective of your religious beliefs, irrespective of it, we say God is the holding pen. And God provides divine guidance to some belief, whether Islam, Hinduism, or Christianity. But you have a vital responsibility. You have to be committed. You have to participate in the rituals. And you have to be connected to God. But then, and that is what we call your understanding. But then there's everyday life. What are the things God will allow us to participate in? Culture, education, economics, infrastructure, politics and governance, management. You still have divine guidance. And what I want to highlight to you, that these factors down here are what is common among Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity. And one brother told me last week, I forgot Buddhism. Buddhism is part of this also. But then, in Hinduism, you must remember, there's a God for harmony, God for liberty, God for wealth and prosperity, God for speech. And that is very, very important. So that is spirituality. Then, there is this thing about adversarial behaviors. In the society, you hear all sorts of adversarial terms. All sorts of adversarial terms. People accuse each other, mayhem, terror, tyranny, violence, vulnerability. People like to talk about adventurism. People like to talk about disrespect and distortion, and then they like to divert the facts and spin the facts. All I'm attempting to tell you here is that be aware that there are terms being used in the society just to divide us. So what I'm doing here is eat away, is try to eradicate the differences between us, the two major races. Then there is democratic centralism. And democratic centralism is an ideology that is practiced by communist countries, and we need to understand the features of democratic centralism, whereby there is group thinking, and without going in more with the details of it, The state machinery must be controlled by the political party from top to bottom. And all I want you to do is to think about it. What have I done? So what I have done is try to build a model whereby what is common among us involves civics. I involve spirituality. Then I bring adversarial behavior. Then I ask you to take a look at democratic centralism and make a decision about it. And finally, this bridge. So if we can pull the races together with these features, there have to be a bridge through which we can operate with trust, with the knowledge that we are protected by our Constitution, with the knowledge that there is a multiplicity of natural resources we have to develop. And this bridge is what we call the rational bridge. And that rational bridge is whereby we can operate and manage the affairs of our country, manage public domain policies. We must be able to analyze, as Guyanese, public domain policies. And I developed a model which I call variable production functions. All it is many pieces of things put together. It has to be legal. It has to be in language that you can understand. Does it conform to any precedence or structure or any activity anywhere in the world? What are the business controls? How much it must cost when you implement a policy? What are the specifications? What are the do's and don'ts of the policy? How are we going to manage it? How would globalization affect the policy? If it's price for a commodity, how would price in England, where it's manufactured, where prices go up, going to affect us if we are importing? And who will this policy affect? The end user? Who's going to use the policy? And finally, what are the outcomes within block variables? Block variables is a fancy term to tell you, hey, if new things come along, how is it going to affect the policy? And those features, what I have outlined here for this rational bridge. So what do we have? We have a model to affect racial relationships within media governance. All we at GMPA, all the media is doing is an attempt to provide knowledge, to provide tools through which the people of Guyana can effectively participate in the decision-making process through Article 13, through Article 149. If you do not know your rights, and if you are not grounded, if you do not have the knowledge of these features, well then, how can you participate in the decision-making process? How can you in election preparedness, how can you engage in meaningful dialogue, meaningful debate? How can you, if you do not and are not aware of these features in your Constitution, to understand public domain policies, to understand spirituality, to understand adversarialism, to understand civics, to understand democratic centralism? Fellow Guyanese, all I'm asking you to think about it. On behalf of Guyana Media Proprietors Association, in our partner with European Union, what I've outlined to you is how Guyana Media Proprietors Association have adopted media governance to provide public awareness, consultation, professional development, and we're taking on this monster, race relations. It is a monster. And these features can eradicate it. If you think about it, these features can eradicate it. Race relations is an impediment to our development. Race relations, it affects our decision-making process. It affects our everyday life. It affects our vision. It affects natural justice. Race relations put us in a negative limelight. whereby we cannot anticipate and modify those features that can directly affect our livelihood. Thank you for listening.